Gonzalez, who's our program coordinator for Project Rebound here on campus, will be speaking on the panel at 10 a.m. So he'll give you a few more details about that. We also have a sister program for that, which is a BA program that's being taught at Lancaster Prison. So prisoners on the level 4 yard at Lancaster Prison are actually taking college classes being taught by our faculty from Cal State LA, who are driving all the way to Lancaster. And in 6 years, which is about as long as it takes to get a BA here at Cal State, they can get a BA being a prisoner there at Lancaster State Prison. And they're actually matriculated students, just like those of you who are students on our campus. There's no difference between you except for your housing, of course. And if they, and some of them will be released before they finish their BA at Lancaster, they'll actually transition directly here to campus and be in class with you. So if you happen to meet one, be friendly. And it's really important to recognize President Covino's support for these programs. We're the only Cal State that has a BA program in a prison. It's actually the only way that any prisoner in California can get a BA. There's lots of AA programs and worthless degree programs that don't count for anything when you get out. But an actual BA program, this is the only campus that offers that. And of course, we're very lucky to have the Project Rebound program as well. There's 20-something Cal State campuses, and only 7 of us got them. And the reason for that is the support from our administration. So it's really important for us to recognize the support that President Covino has given for these programs, which of course he doesn't have to, but I think you all should be, if you're not already aware, that President Covino is very motivated to not only help our campus community, but the community that our campus is located in. And certainly with the last 30 years of criminalization and incarceration that our communities have suffered from, helping people get out and get back into life is a really important issue for our campus to be grappling with. I'd also like to thank Cheryl Nave, the Dean of CCOE, for her generous support to make this and my Dean, Pamela Scott Johnson, who had another obligation, unfortunately, this morning, who also provided financial and moral support for us to be able to put this conference on for you this morning. And speaking in her place will be Assistant Dean Michael Soldentenko. I'd also like to thank our lovely cadre of volunteers, including Alexis and Kevin, who are both very lovely, for all the hard work that they've done to make this all possible. They're going to be running the registration outside, so you've probably met many of them, and they'll be walking around. Can you guys wave your hands? If you have any questions, any problems or concerns, feel free to give them a tap on the shoulder. And also, of course, I'd like to thank my co-chair, Francis Sue, who's a professor and she'll be coming up to give you kind of a synopsis of what the conference is about today. I hope you enjoy yourselves.
This is my usual because I'm so short. Well, good morning and welcome to our second annual conference on reintegration of formerly incarcerated populations. This year we have a focus on career development, and I hope all of you have picked up your program from outside, yes? The inside page gives you a layout of what to expect today. We are very, very happy to have the opportunity to invite Mr. Scott Butnick to be here to be our keynote speaker. And then you will hear from our educational panel. And then what we learned from last year is our student panel was very impressive. So we invite another panel of students come back to talk to you. And then we will have some experts that have been helping this population to seek jobs to come and sit on the vocational panel. And then last but not least, we have the mental health panel of speakers coming to talk to us about the mental health issue among this population. It is not a myth, but a fact that finding sustained employment is an important component of the transition from prison to the community. Most of these individuals experience great difficulties finding jobs after their release. Studies have shown that 600,000 to 700,000 inmates are released every year. 2/3 of them will be rearrested within 3 years after the release. And over half of all people leaving prison or on probation are unemployed. So by now, I'm pretty sure you understand why our focus is on career development, because we want to do our part to help the society to solve this issue. In addition, California spent $9.6 billion on prisons in 2011, but just $5.7 billion on higher education. In other words, the state spends $8,667 per student each year, as compared to roughly $50,000 per inmate each year. So as educators in social and human services, we see the needs to prepare our students to work with the formerly incarcerated populations. Through our keynote speaker and the various panels of speakers, we aim to offer information to better prepare us in preparing or in helping this population in attaining and sustaining employment, and ultimately becoming free at last as independent and contributing citizens in the society. Enjoy the conference.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. All right, we're starting to crank it up here. We thank both Robert and Francis for their not only intellectual effort, their passion and commitment, but also their wise guidance to bring to you the second annual, right? Wonderful to have a second annual. So thanks to the two of you. Shall we thank them? All right, I'm here on behalf of everyone in the Charter College of Education to welcome each and every one of you to this event. So if you're from the Cal State LA student community, the faculty and staff community, I'm welcoming you to this event. You knew how to find us, you know why you're here. We're glad that you're here. For those of you who are coming to the campus today to visit with us, we want to extend to you a special welcome. So if you're not from the student community right now and you're here from an agency or organization, could you just wave your hand so our students can see where you are? All right, students, it's incumbent upon you to be extroverted and go and meet and talk to our guests, because they bring to you a wealth of experience. That's important for you, but it's also important for your networking. We know how important networking is in professional development. So do please take the time to give your own welcome to our external guests. So really, I want to thank the guests for taking time today to be here. So really, thank you so much. Should we thank them? Really, thank you so much. As you might know, our mission in the Charter College of Education is really twofold. What we do in the Charter College is we prepare future educators, and that is a broad definition and for broad settings, right? So obviously everybody thinks about teacher preparation as the first place, right? But we know that we have educators in formal and informal settings serving really important roles in our communities for children, youth, families, and their communities. So that's one part of our role. So I imagine some of you are here today as future educators, and so we want to thank you for that, and we really want to encourage you in your professional development as well as your intellectual development to prepare you to be an educator in all kinds of settings. The other part of our mission in the Charter College is to provide professional learning opportunities for educators throughout the course of their careers, right? So we know that sitting here today, maybe you already have that bachelor's, or you're working to complete that bachelor's, but over the course of your lifetime, you're going to seek other educational opportunities, again, both informal and formal. And so we in the Charter College take that professional learning aspect of educator professional development. Very important. I should mention we have lots of master's degrees. We also have the EDD in educational leadership. And what's unique about that doctoral program on our campus is we broadly define educational leadership, right? So we're not just talking about principals and district folks. We're talking about people who go on to serve leadership roles in community-based organizations and do policy work and whatnot. So if anybody out there is looking for that next credential at the highest level, we would encourage you to take a look at the CCUE for that role. All right, so we do a lot in the Charter College. As we think about universities, I was pondering this morning that, well, it must be pretty important, right? The university is using its resources to dedicate itself to educator preparation and professional learning for educators. Why do we do this? All right? I'm going to give you a biological answer to that question. Some of you know that I'm a chemist by training, and so sometimes I put on those chemist glasses and I see different things than you might ordinarily see. I think too often in the world that we live in, we forget that we're basically animals, right? We are biological organisms. We are animals. And as I think about us in that kind of perspective, we know that evolutionary neuroscientists now tell us that our brains, as they look at the different parts and growth of our brains over evolution, there's a part of our brain that's ancient and reptilian. All right, so I want you all to get in touch with your inner reptilian, your inner reptile, right? And that part of you, that inner reptile part of you in your brain is constantly seeking information. And you're constantly seeking information, right? Because you want to survive. So we all know in Maslow's hierarchy of needs that food and shelter is right up there at the very top, right? But if you don't have that ancient reptilian part of your brain engaged, right, it's going to be a fish at a time, right, rather than learning how to fish for yourself. So really, this is why I think that civil societies, civil little d democratic societies decide that they want to commit to education because we're fulfilling really a basic human need, right? So the work that you do in every interaction to educate yourself and another human being is satisfying an ancient basic need that we all have. And that's pretty important. So really what I want to say to you in closing is, you know, we all make choices about how to spend our lives and what to do with our time. And you have chosen to be here today. You have chosen your professional pathway for a reason. And I want you to understand it's a very important reason. I know that you're here because you, like me, want to live in a society where people's needs are being met. And education and caring and delivering care and concern is basic human needs. So I really want to applaud you for being guided by your values and really encourage you to stay true to those values because we're living in some crazy times, right? And if we don't hang on to those values, we can get very distracted or very angry or very discouraged, very bitter, right? So really, I want to thank you for being committed to your values and being committed to basic human needs. Thank you so much.
So, buenos dias. I'm not as bubbly as Dee. I tend to be a little more dry because I get nervous in front of people being around. That's why I took teaching as a profession, not a smart idea. But let me begin by telling you who I am. I'm Mike Soltenko. I'm the Associate Dean of the College of Natural and Social Science. I am also a special advisor to the provost. That's been recent transitions. For a long time, I was both the chair and faculty, Department of Chicano and Latino Studies. However, I'd like to welcome you to the second annual Conference on Integration of Formerly Incarcerated Population, not as a Cal State LA administrator, but rather as a parent of a formerly incarcerated individual. Okay? So my son spent time in the Arizona system, right? He plea bargained himself into, well, to enjoy Sheriff Arpaio's fine attention, let us say. And in those early days, it was tough. In fact, these gray hairs, I blame it on him. All right? But luckily, he had parents, and more importantly, he had parents with resources. Right? I could pay for an attorney. I learned about bail bondsmen and everything else that goes with this quote-unquote justice system that we live under. So he had those opportunities. Eventually, after his time in the system, he got out. His daughter was born. He returned to the community college. He eventually got his BA from Arizona State. Then went on. After that, he found that he liked school. So he went to graduate school, got a doctorate, and now teaches at a state school in Scottsdale State, Georgia. So he found his way. The gray hair still remains, but he found his way to a successful life. But he had that because of advantages. Many of us don't have those advantages. And I'm hoping that in conferences like these, where we talk to each other, where we interconnect with each other, we learn from our experiences and skills, that we can, in a sense, even the field, given the inequalities that exist in the justice system. This became more of a speech than it became an introduction. So let me welcome you to this second annual conference on integration of formerly incarcerated populations. I hope you folks benefit from this, and I hope that we will continue to do these type of events at Cal State, because we all, as a community, need to help each other in finding success. So thank you, and good luck.
It would be really hard to imagine a career transition.
Okay, now I'd like to welcome our keynote speaker.
I think that's the only one we have right there.
Is that it?
Yeah, but I don't think we have sound.
Say again?
I don't think we have
I
sound.
don't know if we have sound that's loud enough.
Oh, it wasn't playing the sound.
It was meant to.
It was, but it's just from here.
See if we can.
It would be really hard to.
What's that? Is that good enough?
Yeah, I don't think
I'd like to welcome our keynote speaker, Scott Budnick, the founder and director of the Anti-Recidivism Coalition. He's also a former movie producer. He gave up Hollywood in order to serve the formerly incarcerated population. So please welcome Scott Budnick.
I want to know we can play it.
What's up, y'all? How we doing? Gotta turn this damn crowd up a little bit. Good morning. Just wanted to, real quick thank yous. Robert, you're the man. Thanks for everything you're doing, brother. Thanks for leading the charge over here. As he said, I've been over to the class at Lancaster Prison a bit. This is the only school in the entire state that's giving guys and women in prison the chance to get their BA. So, like, this is literally the trailblazer of the entire state. So, definitely shout out to President Covino. Definite shout out to my man Jose Gonzalez right here, student at Cal State LA, and works with me at ARC, as well as Kent, who's in the back, Jesse, Justin, Emiliano, Luis right here. Thank you all for having me out here. I'm excited to be here. So, I think, let me just give you a little bit of background, because the first thing anyone ever asks me is like, why did the producer of The Hangover decide to go into prisons and do this kind of stuff? I grew up in Atlanta. I went to college at Emory University, and I was pre-med. And my freshman year, I was actually, a bunch of us were asked to come down and be extras in a Civil War movie called Andersonville. And so a bunch of students from Emory went, and we were all extras for the day, and they put us in like Civil War uniforms and put us out in a prison camp. So I actually played a prisoner in my first movie as an extra, and I got paid $60 for the day. And it was miserable. It was like 20 degrees outside, and it was this outdoor prison camp, and they were shooting the film. And after a while, all the kids I went to school with, they're like, fuck this, we're leaving, and they left. And I'm watching the director, and he's like on a crane, and the camera's coming down. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, the director says, cue the rain machine. And it started raining on us. And I was the only one that stayed because I thought it was the coolest thing ever, and everyone else left. The casting director ended up hiring me, so I became the assistant to the casting director, and that is how pre-med went out the window. And I then became a film major. And so I ended up moving out to LA, and I struggled for 6 months to find a job. 4-year college degree, 6 months, couldn't find a job. And then I got a call from DreamWorks, and they wanted to hire me on a movie called Road Trip. And it was the director's first movie. His name was Todd Phillips. So I got to fly back. They flew me back to Atlanta to work in my hometown. They put me up in a hotel in my hometown, and the first movie I did was Road Trip. And I literally just hustled my ass off. If he wanted a cup of coffee, I ran and got him a cup of coffee. If he wanted a peanut butter and jelly sandwich cut diagonally with the crust cut off, I cut it perfectly diagonally, and the crust was all cut off. I was called a production assistant, but really that just means bitch. I worked my ass off, and on his second movie, which was Old School, he hired me and said, not only do I want you to produce this movie with me, but I want you to be the president of my company. So I got promoted from being a bitch to being the president of this company. My career sort of took off. We did Road Trip and Old School, then Starsky and Hutch, 3 movies that made a lot of money. On Starsky and Hutch, my job as kind of the junior producer on the movie is I was in charge of Snoop and keeping him sober. So honestly, for the shoot, me and him had a real understanding, and he was coaching his kids' football team, so he stayed sober. He didn't smoke any weed. For the 3 months we were shooting the movie, he played a character called Huggy Bear, and he actually begged us for it because he used to watch the TV show and he loved this character, Huggy Bear. I'm getting the prison stuff in a second. When we did reshoots, like 6 months later, we had 3 days of reshoots, and he was really, really high. Ben Stiller was on set, and Snoop was nowhere to be found, so I had to drive down to Diamond Bar to his house and get past all his security and literally touch his little body and wake him up in bed. And yes, he was wearing tighty-whities. That's not a joke. And had to drive him down to the set. And so that's what it takes to be a junior producer. After that film, a friend of mine that I worked with asked me to come down to Sylmar Juvenile Hall and come down and be a guest speaker in a creative writing program called Inside Out Writers. And I went down to Barry J. Nydorf Juvenile Hall in Sylmar and went to the compound where there's kids 14, 15, 16, 17, all being tried as adults, all facing hundreds of years, life without parole. And the first day I ever went in there, we had a class of about 12 kids, and a kid sitting right next to me was named David Negretti. And when I sat and I introduced myself to him, I said, "Tell me what's up, bro." He said that he had just been sentenced yesterday to 300 years in prison at 15 years old. And that just like knocked the wind out of me. And mind you, I was in the movie business and living in Hollywood, and every conversation was about this actor and this writer. And after 4 years of living here, I just hated living in LA because it just felt like bullshit to me. And so this, going down to Juvenile Hall and meeting this kid and hearing his story just blew me away. And the kid sitting on the other side of me looked like he was 9 years old, but he was heading off to prison for 6 years for robbery. And the topic was forgiveness. And this little kid stood up and his hands were shaking, and he read this speech about forgiveness that he wrote. And it just like blew me away. And so that day, I'm not somebody that can sit back and just witness injustice and witness horrors being done to children. And I couldn't understand, I just could not comprehend, and I still can't comprehend why we would ever think that something that someone does at 15 years old is the thing that should define them for the rest of their lives. Because I was a real dumbass at 15, and I was in college even more of a dumbass. And I didn't figure it out till after college and after I moved out here. And so I dedicated my life on that day to doing everything I can to tear down this horrible, inhumane, and obviously racist system. And started teaching that writing class. And I went in there and started teaching that writing class every Saturday. Still, since 2004, I still teach that writing class every Saturday. And last week, Common came to class, which was kind of cool, down at Juvenile Hall. I just got on every board I could get on to hire these guys and girls when they got out. And then really what I saw is all of these kids in the compound were going to prison for the most part. And being thrown into the system, because they were young, they were getting thrown straight to level 4 yards, the highest security yards where there's no programs. And I'm like, that's insane that you would take the most vulnerable, the most impressionable, the youngest people going into prison and send them to the worst places. I know my man Jose sitting right here, when he was 17, he first went to prison. They sent him to High Desert, level 4, 180, which is probably one of the 2 worst prisons in California. And they expected that to help him, to rehabilitate him, and that's one big joke. So I started exploring the prison system and ended up visiting the college program at Ironwood, where there were about 500 guys on the yard who were all full-time college students. And then I started working with different prisons to start college programs. And so I had a place to filter all the young people I was teaching when they got into prison to a safe environment. Ended up seeing a bunch of these kids get out. And they were spread all over LA County. So me, myself, a chaplain, other insider writers, teachers, different people from Homeboy and different places, started doing retreats where we would just bring them all together for a weekend at a campsite or on the beach or something, and bring them together to do different things. And this group started coming together often and started growing, and that was sort of the beginnings of ARC. What it really crystallized for me was I was doing all this work with this kid, and like one kid at a time, right? And I was on The Hangover and sitting on a mountaintop in Vegas with Bradley Cooper and Mr. Chow and all the things The Hangover brings you. And one day my phone keeps ringing, it's collect calls from prison. And Governor Schwarzenegger had just cut $300 million out of the prison program budget, and our entire college program was being cut. And at that point, there were 10,000 inmates in California prisons that were full-time college students. And all of them were being told, you know what? Everything you had, you were changing your identity from drug dealer, gang member to college student, and all of your plans in life were now to get out and walk a college campus, and now they're being told you can't enroll. And I probably got 60 collect calls on that day on the top of that mountain. I remember it vividly. And so I was scrambling, and that same day, I was able to organize a call with 5 guys and girls that got out of prison and with the head of the California Senate. And we got on the phone with him, and these 5 folks who had been in prison, who were now out in community college and in university, told a very simple story. This is who I was, this is how I changed, and this is what I'm doing now. And in that 20-minute phone call, he restored all the money for the college program. And that was when... And that was when I realized that the producer of The Hangover can get some people on the phone, but when folks that have been through the struggle tell their stories, everything changes. And it was amazing because as I remember going through that, I'm sitting in my chair on this phone call watching that 11-year-old that was in my class at Selmar Juvenile Hall, the kid that looked 11, that went to prison for 6 years, Adam. He became my prop assistant on The Hangover and was a prop assistant that day as all that was happening. And he hustled so hard that they took him to Ironman after the hangover, got him into the union, and he's now making about $150,000 a year. So, conference is about career development. That's some career development. I then went to Sacramento for my first time on a bill called SB 9, which was a bill to end life without parole sentences for juveniles. And I don't know if you guys know this, but the U.S. is the only country in the world other than Somalia that would sentence a kid to LWOP. No other country in the world does that. I went to Germany, I went to Africa. No place in the world is there a sentence over 20 to life. But somehow in the land of the free, 25 to life is not enough. Let's give them a gun enhancement to make it 50 to life and a gang enhancement to make it 75 to life, and now we can sleep well. But sometimes that's not enough, so let's do life without parole for a child. And now we know they can never get out, no matter how much they change. And so for 7 years, no Republicans in the legislature would vote for this bill, and 12 Democrats would not vote for the bill, and for 7 years this bill failed by 2 votes. And all this bill did was give a child who got life without parole the chance to go to the parole board after 25 years. So not even a big lift. Still 12, I don't want to use that word, 12 weak legislators would not vote for this bill. And we went up there, and we're sitting at lunch, and I have a bunch of our ARC folks with us, but there's no ARC at this point, so we didn't call them that. And we're sitting at lunch, and an assembly member runs in and says, the speaker wants to see you, the speaker wants to see you. This is the speaker of the assembly. This is the shot caller. This is the guy that controls these 12 votes that we don't have. And so I run over there, and I walk into the speaker's office with the 5 formerly incarcerated folks with me, and I walk in there, and there's 3 hangover posters on the table with a Sharpie marker, and a photographer, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? Like, no one knows who I am in LA, but in Sacramento, I'm famous. And I sign some posters, I take some pictures, and he says, okay, what are we here for? And I tell him, and I pull him out the little spreadsheet of who's not voting. He calls 2 offices, he says, I want you guys to go talk to these 2 assembly members now. We went there, those 5 people told their stories. We got the votes that day, we passed the bill, and it's now the law. So that was the birth of ARC. We set up offices in downtown LA at 5th and Hill, where we still reside. Since then, we've worked with other incredible organizations like Human Rights Watch and Homeboy and Youth Justice Coalition and others to now pass 9 laws that Governor Brown has signed, including SB 260 and SB 261, that looks at every single young person in the system that received life sentences and now gives them the chance of parole after 15 or 20 or 25 years. And that bill now gives hope to 20,000 people that were going to die in prison. And my man Jose right now is home because of SB 260. He was a lifer, and now he's home. And David Negretti, who sat next to me in my first Inside Out Writers class in Silmar Juvenile Hall, David Negretti, who had 300 years, now goes to the parole board in 2 years, and he's going to be home with his mom very soon. And right now, we went around to a bunch of different prisons to educate the men and women inside about SB 260 and about the fact that they now have the chance to come home. And that's what brought me up to the Pelican Bay SHU for my first time. I was hoping that the Nightline video would play, but we don't have sound.
I think we actually do now.
It's all right. We're cool. But we actually were able to bring cameras into the Pelican Bay SHU, and even more importantly, into the short corridor of the Pelican Bay SHU, where all the people that are validated as members are, and we were able to talk to them. And the first day I was in there, we had all the guys lined up who had received life and were now going to be told they now have a chance to come home, and they're all in cages next to each other like a kennel. And you're going one by one and talking them through the cage. And I get to this guy, and he's a 60-year-old man, and had come to prison at 15 years old. And he had been in the Pelican Bay SHU for 28 years. He had been in solitary confinement for 28 years. And I told him that he now has the chance to go to the parole board. He now has a chance to come home, and this man, the one we call the worst of the worst, the ones that have to be caged 24 hours a day, starts crying and weeping. And he said, this is the first time since I was 15 years old that I've had any hope. And he stuck his pinky finger through the cage, and we did the Pelican Bay shake through the little hole in the cage. And he said, you're the first person I've touched in 28 years. And the power of hope, the power of love, has now, that's really all our mission is. Our mission is to reduce mass incarceration and cut this system in half and support people when they're coming home and change laws. But really, our job is to send love, and our job is to send hope. And when we started ARC in 2013, we had 150 members. Today we have over 400 members, all who were incarcerated. Some are 18, some are 20, some are 40, some spent 1 year in prison, some spent 30 years in prison, but everyone's supporting each other, making positive steps forward. The majority of our members are in community colleges and universities. We have a housing program, so we started the ARC College Dorm at LA Mission College in Sylmar, where we have 37 people living together, and at LA Trade Tech College with our house in Koreatown, our new house we opened 3 months ago called Magnolia, with 22 people on probation and parole, living together, going to college, working, supporting each other. And check this out. In the state of California, the recidivism rate for that 18 to 29-year-old population is 72%. 7 out of 10 that get out go right back in. 70%. And in YA, if you go to the Youth Authority, it costs $275,000 to incarcerate one child. $275,000 to fail 7 out of 10 times. Now, I don't know if we have any business majors in the house, but if you start a company and your product costs $275,000 and 7 out of 10 of them suck, you would be bankrupt and you would be fucking fired. But somehow the system is allowed to do this year in and year out, and nothing changes. And so, this, in our ARC housing program, we've had it for 3 years now. Out of about 70 residents, we've had one person rearrested for a misdemeanor vandalism. And that's 1%. So, think about if you invest $15,000 in someone when they get out, the return you get versus investing $275,000 and failing 7 out of 10 times. We have a lot of job training programs. We have our folks working at Starbucks and Home Depot. When you go to the Staples Center, almost every usher in there is formerly incarcerated, and probably have 24 ARC members as ushers there, so watch your wallets. Jose just quit there. He's like Jamaican. He has like 3 jobs, and he just quit the Staples Center last week. I'm picking on Jose right now this whole time. But about a year ago, the LA Federation of Labor, talk about career development, the LA Federation of Labor came to us and said, we want to give you 30 union jobs for your guys. And if you put the right people, if you create a training and you put the right people into these 30 union jobs, next year we're going to give you 100. And so last year, we did a training and ended up doing a 12-week training where we paid all of our members $15 an hour just for training during those 12 weeks. And we ended up graduating them, and every one of them is now placed in a union job. And now we've started the second cohort that's in its 8th week now. And just this morning I found out, before the 12 weeks is even over, 8 of them have just been placed in the laborers, and they've been dispatched to their first union job this morning, and they will have a union job for life. And it's going so well that the LA Federation of Labor and the building trades have now asked for a 3rd cohort to start in June. So we're going to be placing more than 100 people directly into union careers. And as you see these things happen, and as these folks that are getting into these union jobs get out and they tell their stories, and these powerful stories, now the fire departments come to us, LA County Fire and CAL FIRE, and they said, can you start a 12-week training? For the first time in history, we want to place formerly incarcerated folks into the firefighting service. And if you create that training, If you create the training and you put the right people in, people that will be on time, people that will be early, people that will work their ass off, people that have a good attitude, people that will pass random drug tests, if you find us those right 30, they're now in a firefighting job for life. And so that's starting in the next quarter. And now we've also partnered with an organization at West LA College called Hollywood CPR, which is a year-long training at West LA College that I've been involved in since its inception, and it's training into the movie business. So people that wanted to get into grip, electric, construction, camera, hair, makeup, sound, editing, whatever field you want to get into in the movie and TV business, it's a year-long training where you're sitting on campus, learning how to do all these things. You pick the one you want. At the end of the year, you have a guaranteed placement into the union, and your starting salary is $38 an hour. And in the movie business, we work 12-hour days, and time and a half starts at 8 hours. So a normal day with no real overtime is $500 a day. So talk about placing people not into living wage jobs, into like skyrocket careers where 2 years out of prison you could be buying your family a house. And so that's the stuff we do at ARC. We have a mentoring program. We have a lot of therapy around trauma, childhood trauma, the trauma of just being incarcerated and going through that system. We now have a brand new program that started since Common has visited Juvenile Hall. Common is now starting a program with ARC. He's one of my favorite rappers of all time, so I'm like starstruck every day. We brought him over to Ironwood to see the college program, and he was so blown away by what he saw. He said, I want to do 4 concerts in 4 prisons in 4 days. And he goes, I don't want to do it like, I want to do it like I do it at Coachella. So we brought in all the staging from Coachella, all the lights from Coachella, all the sound from Coachella, his band from Chicago, his DJ, and we rocked 4 shows in 4 days at Calipatria on a level 4 yard, at Ironwood, at CIW for the women, and at Lancaster. And now that went so well, we filmed every bit of it. And Univision was there, and they were going to put it on their station, and ABC Nightline was there, and they were going to put it on. Now he wants to do 2 more concerts. We're going to go up to Pelican Bay and do the first concert ever in the history of Pelican Bay Prison. And on the 21st of August, he's going to do, everyone's invited, 21st of August, free concert for the community on the steps of the Capitol in Sacramento. And it's about to be 5,000 people in Sacramento, sing a free show. He's already invited Big Sean. He's already invited Alicia Keys and John Legend. He's also already invited Kendrick. And so it's going to be Common and Friends on the steps of the Capitol. And the next day, we have 7 pieces of criminal justice legislation that we're working on this year. He's going to be in the Capitol on the 22nd, meeting with the governor, meeting with the speaker, meeting with the pro tem, and meeting with legislators to pass these laws this year. And so that's what's happening on the ARC front. What I'd like to end with, and I've kind of gone on a transition as I've been doing this work. At first, it was like one kid at a time, jobs, housing, all these things that folks need. And then I realized, like, if we change laws, and if we were able to take money from the state and really use their money and that sort of thing, so the policy work, in 1 hour of work, you could help 20,000 people. In 1 email, you could direct $50 million to LA for reentry housing. And so I realized that the policy work was crucial in really making the change. But now that we worked on Prop 57 and we did polling, and you poll Californians and you say, okay, how do you feel about rehabilitation versus punishment? And the majority of Californians say they believe in rehabilitation over punishment. But if you ask Republicans, they like punishment more than rehabilitation. But as you start listing crimes, and then you say, but what about for robbery? They're like, nah, punishment. What about for attempted murder? Punishment. What about for assault with deadly weapon? Punishment. And as soon as you start listing crimes, these same citizens in our state say no more. And the crazy part is, The recidivism rate for those who committed violent crimes and were released through the parole board is 1%. So if you committed murder and you got out through the parole board, your chance of ever going back is 1%. But if you go into prison for a non-violent drug crime, your chance of coming back is 90%. So if you just look at data, the safest people to release from prison are those that committed violent crimes and did some time. But right now, Californians don't believe that. And if we really want to make a dent into our prison system and our jail system, we really need to start changing the narrative. I don't think I have one ARC member, at least not the 5 in the room right now, that committed a nonviolent crime. I don't know if one of the 400, everyone I work with committed a violent crime. And every one of them are out here kicking ass. And I really feel like we're dealing with people that if you turn on the news every night, you see horror stories about black and brown people. You see every awful crime. You see a drive-by shooting that kills a 3-year-old girl. You see an illegal immigrant that kills someone on the pier in San Francisco. And if you're that ignorant person living in your house in Malibu and that's what you're watching every night, I would probably say lock them up and throw away the fucking key also, because I want my kids that are sleeping down the hall safe. And unless we change what those stories are, unless every person in this room who's had experience with the system and is sitting in this room today goes out and tells your story of change, unless every person in this room has worked with someone or known someone who's changed and tells that story of change, we're not going to change the way the public feels about the folks that are sitting in our prisons in California. And so, from the movie business, I'll just put it in perspective. When I made a stupid movie called The Hangover, they gave me $30 million to make the movie, but they spent $100 million marketing the movie. Meaning just putting ads on TV and posters on that sort of stuff, $100 million. So now imagine, and I'll equate this to like marriage equality. If you ask anyone that was in the marriage equality movement, why 10 years ago was gay marriage illegal, and now it's legal everywhere, the first thing they'll say to you is Will and Grace. There was a TV show that ignorant people watched for 10 years that had a gay couple, and after 10 years, all these ignorant people across the United States didn't give a shit about gay marriage anymore. Think about what we can do if you guys get out there and tell your stories. If you shoot videos and you put them out through social media. If I get out and I make movies, and I'm starting a new film company and I'm in the middle of raising $300 million only to tell these stories, imagine what we could do to change the hearts and minds of people that are out there. So my challenge to everyone here is to tell these stories. If you're formerly incarcerated, get out there and tell your story. Because if we don't change people's hearts and minds, there's only so far we can go. Thank you guys very much. God bless you all.